I'm very concerned about the education that students are getting about AI, being told that this is bad, that they really shouldn't use this, because we know they are using it and they're finding creative and good ways to use it, using it to better understand what the professor is asking for, to help summarize the lecture in a way that's more digestible to them. They're finding those creative ways, but then the instructor isn't, is just many of their instructors. Yeah, and that's so confusing because can you imagine any student in their first job where their boss is like, here's a project, and the student's like, oh, I'm not going to use AI for this because I was told not to. I mean, that boss is going to go like, wait, hold on. Like, you should use all of the resources out there for this project. We want the project done the best that it can be done.
Yes, you're so right.
Yeah, I'm really very concerned about that. And that's one of the reasons I talk about this so much. Students are using this. We need to understand how they're using it. They're doing really cool things with it. And if we're telling them not to use it, they're not coming to us, and using it.
Hello, humans. I'm here for the weekly Vinedown. I'm your host, Emily Smith. I'm joined by Emily Pacheco, who is the Associate Director for Admission at Case Western Reserve. And Emily, if we had a list of like who's who in AI and college admissions, you would be like on the top 3 of like People Magazine's hottest AI admissions personalities. So thank you for being the original influencer in our space.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I'm also excited that I'm with a fellow Emily of the same age, because it's a very popular name, as you know, but most people are like between the ages of 20 and 30 or a little younger even. So I'm excited that, our parents were on the same line when we named us. That's exciting to me. But yes, I am here because of the work that I've done in AI, in specific to college admissions. I jumped into that as my niche. And yeah, I'm here to talk about that with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, I always say that I'm like the Emily matriarch because I am like 15 years older, at least than the average Emily. And I get a lot of like when you meet an Emily and they're a lot younger than you, they're like, well, why do you have those lines by your eyes? And you're like, chill, we're not the same age. I'm also very thrilled to have another woman on the podcast because we've had so many freaking men lately. Sorry, guys, we love you, but sometimes the ladies need to show up and take some things over. So thank you for breaking the streak of many men on the Vinedown. Emily, can you talk to us about the AICA SIG that you are leading and talk about like what that group is up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. It's turning 1 year old, my community, AICA standing for AI in college admissions. And it was about, a little bit over a year ago that I got really excited about AI, saw the uses in my own day-to-day work, started kind of, jumping in and experimenting with it. And very quickly that made me want to look for more resources out there and resources specific to my world of college admissions. So I went out looking and hit a wall pretty quickly that there just wasn't much out there. I just realized I was too early in the game, really, because I just didn't find a lot of people talking about it. I didn't find a lot out there in terms of resources for me to use. So I turned to the experts of college admissions, NACAC, and assumed that they would have resources. And at that time, they didn't. It was too early for them even. They just hadn't really taken that on. And so I reached out to them after noticing there wasn't a special interest group, thought that this would be a good topic for a new group. And got a quick yes and got, enough interest from other people, started this group. I started it with 2 other NACAC members, a very seasoned college counselor, Myra Castro, and then also Sebastian Brown from the University of Oregon. The 3 of us joined together, started this group, put together a group of advisors. We have 10 different advisors, that are helping to lead this community. And we're just working to put out educational resources so that other people who get excited about this technology now go and actually find resources to help them dive in and figure out how this could help them in their day-to-day work. So that's kind of the birth of AICA.
I love it. And Emily, that's how you and I met. You actually reached out to me and you were like, hey, you're kind of a visible person in AI. You invited me to join this board of advisors, which I'm so thrilled to be on. And I think one of the things that you and I talk about all the time is like, how can we own this corner of thought leadership for AI as it impacts like not only the operating system of colleges, but the way students view AI, parents view AI, how AI is viewed like from all angles in the admissions process. And what's been really interesting to me, Emily, over the last like year that you and I have been chatting about this, both like on stage and sort of privately, is this big evolution that I've seen between like a year ago. I feel like we were talking like 90% of what we were talking about was like how like we view AI within the teaching and learning space, how students view like AI detection. And I feel like we've evolved that conversation a little bit into really like higher order thinking about AI, whether it's on the student side of things or on the college side of things. And I'm curious, like, as we hopefully start to wrap up this era of a lot of focus on like fear of AI detection tools, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how that fear potentially inhibits like students doing genuine creative expression in their work. Like, do you think we've moved on for that? Do you think colleges are sending students the right signals? Like, what is the final stage of cleanup there?
I think the question you have to start with there is where does that fear come from? That, like AI detection, that focus. And I definitely that comes from this idea, this thought that AI can only be used to cheat. That students are using it to bypass the learning, using it to shortcut their assignments. They're using it in that cut and paste dry kind of way. And I think, when you haven't seen how this technology can work in other ways, that's your first instinct is just, oh gosh, this technology is helping students just bypass learning. And that's seriously problematic. Where do we go from there? AI detection. And so, yeah, that's just been, that was definitely the first wave. I hope we move away from that. But I think, I know our conversations have moved away from that. Me and you have, and the circle that I'm in, the people that are interested in this topic, the people that are researching this, and even just reading about it and educating themselves about it, they realize really quickly that AI detection is a not worthwhile. Efforts spent trying to detect students in that, how they're using it, to copy paste, is not a good use of our resources. But the problem is those are just our circles, Emily. And, that's a small, I've realized that's a small circle. I kind of have this 2080. I've come up with this theory, and it's my 2080 theory that 20% of people are talking about this, and me and you are kind of, and a smaller group is, 10%, 5% is even more, advocating for this, saying we really need to be able to, bring, have conversations with students about this. We need to really, really be talking about this. But 20% are talking about it, and interested in this. And they're the people listening to your podcast right now. This topic resonated with them. They're looking for things out there. They know this is important. Maybe they don't love it. Even in that 20%, I'm not saying that all of those are, like gung ho, super loving this, but that 20% is like, hey, this is going to be a game changer. It's not going away. The problem is that 80%, that other huge percentage that is just not part of that conversation. And maybe they're just not a part of it because it's just not, it's not, they're not interested. But there's also a percentage in there that's, very much of like, this is terrible. This is an instrument of cheating and plagiarism. And I want to close my ears, to this conversation. And that concerns me because this is moving so fast. And more of that 80% need to kind of, I hope more people start joining the conversation within that group.
Yeah, and I think you're right though too, just to point out like, yeah, we have kind of solved it and like we might have moved on from it, but there's also sort of lasting impacts because I'm guessing that you'll say, in your day job when you interact with students and families that there is this like sense of the ambiguity around AI use in the student college process. Like, and I'm worried about that it might create like lasting psychological impacts to students in terms of like their sense of authenticity, right? Because this will be a constant in the ways that they work and live as adults after college. What are your thoughts about that? Like, what do students view right now? And do you think that sort of sense of authentic self for the students are at risk in context of the way they're getting mixed messages about this stuff?
For sure. I'm very concerned about the kind of the education that students are getting about AI, being told that this is bad, that they really shouldn't use this, because we know they are using it and they're finding, creative and good ways to use it that but when they're getting that mixed message, when they go to the AI and it seems to be, very helpful and it's like, helping them create solid work, not just that cheating. They're not using it to copy and paste. They're, using it to better understand what the professor is asking for, to help summarize the lecture in a way that's more digestible to them. They're finding those creative ways, but then the instructor isn't, is just, many of their instructors is sending
Yeah,
a
it's
message. Yeah, and that's so confusing because can you imagine any student in their first job where their boss is like, "Here's a project," and the student's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna use AI for this because I was told not to." I mean, that boss is gonna go like, "Wait, wait, wait, hold on. Like, you should use all of the resources out there for this project. We want the project done the best that it can be done. We're not,
yes.
in the professional world, that's not, it's not like, oh, you did this faster and you wrote it out and you didn't, have
Yeah,
it
like naughty,
straight
naughty.
draft. Yeah, it's not going to be looked at as, a benefit in the real world. So,
You're so
um,
right.
yeah, I'm really very concerned about that, and that's one of the reasons I talk about this so much. I just think, and it's a grassroots effort right now of just like professor to professor, getting into these conversations with educators is helping so many of them understand, oh, okay, we need to, students are using this, we need to help. We need to understand how they're using it. They're doing really cool things with it, and if we're telling them not to use it, they're not coming to us, and using it. One of the things I love to do, I, do a lot of workshops with students, and here I am coming in, this like intimidating figure, this admission person who's going to read your application. If you're applying to Case Western Reserve, I'm going to read your application. And I love to start with asking, and I'm often talking about AI these days, obviously. So I like to ask them, how many of you are using AI in the college admissions process? You know how many people raise their hand, Emily?
I bet none because they're scared. But like it's okay, what why I'm smiling is that like this makes me think of like the data that doesn't support like abstinence education in
Yes,
school, right? Because like
that's
they're
exact.
doing it.
Yeah.
It's happening. And that piece around like play it out all the way out for that like what happens in your first job, like is your new manager going to say to you like no, do this work slower and do it by hand. I've observed recently that there's been this big shift in work lately that like 10, 15 years ago it would have been appropriate to say like I don't know how to do something or I don't have time to do something. Like there is such a new culture in work on the corporate side of things that I experience around like just figure it out using all the tools that you have available to you and not slowing down to do things by hand but actually to go faster to do more using tools like that all involve AI for productivity. Okay, Emily, then what unexpected ways are you seeing this AI anxiety like manifest in the student behavior? You're saying like, yeah, you observe these students who don't raise their hand, probably driven by fear, keeping their hands down. But like, what are some unexpected places you've seen that anxiety manifest?
Yeah, well, I wanted to finish that story because I almost feel like that if I end it there, that seems really mean to like, know that they're gonna raise their hands and ask that question. But I make the point, then I follow up with telling them that I know many of you are using AI, and we know that because of surveys that have come out where students have honestly answered surveys, and we've seen that large percentages of you are using it. And I want you to know that as an admission counselor, I am okay with you using it in good and ethical ways. And I hope that you have adults that you can talk to about this. But I understand many of you don't. I know that this is a hard, space that we're in. It's a really unique space because it wasn't a problem. Like 5 years ago, students, high school juniors, seniors weren't facing this. And in 5 years, I don't think they're going to be facing this in the same way because I think in 5 years, their counseling offices will have clear policies. The universities where they're applying to will have clear policies in terms of how they're expected to use this or not use this specific to that college admissions process. But they're in this like weird limbo spot, and they're like and almost like the guinea pigs right now, and we're like trying to figure out this new world where AI exists, but we haven't caught up. We don't have the infrastructure for teaching them, for teaching the educators that are, teaching them. So, I just think it's a really rough place for them to be in. And I think the most important thing right now is that we, make a comfortable space for them to have these conversations. I wish I was a high school counselor sometimes because I just am like, oh, I'm so jealous of those opportunities to sit down with students who are actually in this process and say, show me what you're doing. Let me show me the new use cases. I've talked to so many high school, college counselors that are using it, just to superpower their counseling skills. That's really the way I see it is like you can take this qualified human college counselor, equip them with this technology, and they become just so much better at what they do, and even able to service so many more students. Lots of college counselors, 400 students, one college counselor, but you often have a really good computer lab where you can equip them, with the right kind of prompt that's really intricate, lots of steps that could take a student 30 minutes, an hour to work through. But at the end of that process, they might have a really good college list. You take a student, like, I have no idea how to create a college list. You can imagine how much work that would be for a human to sit down with that student from square one, and ask those questions, which are really obvious questions. Would you like to live in a big city? Would you like a smaller city? Are you looking for a giant research institution, or do you want, something that's really more small and personal? Those kind of things that help narrow down from 3,000 universities to a list of 20 or 30 for a sophomore or junior, to start looking at. And then you could have a student take that, which is much more meaningful. Has all this list of 20 to 30 schools, has all the things that they're looking for, and then sit down with a human, who is very educated and most likely knows about these universities, and can help them kind of talk through that, and maybe even just narrow it down to a list of 15 schools now. That's a process that would have taken a human 5 hours of work, maybe, a lot of back and forth, maybe week to week, the student working on a little bit, and you could finish that in like one session with a really good prompt.
Yeah, you're right. Digging into that though, like, what are some ways in which, like, sort of the uncertainty that colleges are signaling still about AI use in this process, like, what uncertainty would that create, and what invisible barriers might that create for, like, future student belonging, aside from the, like, process itself, but, like, what that signals over the life of a student feeling like they can belong in part of this community? Because essentially you're saying, like, students are using this and we're asking them to keep this, like, big thing hidden and not show their hand in that way. Like, what do you think the hidden impacts might be, or those invisible barriers might be, that students might feel over time?
Yeah, yeah, and I think there are I've only seen 2 universities so far that have put out a policy that I really don't like, because it's banning it. I think, most universities, realize that this is technology that, can be used in the college admission process, but most universities don't have a policy. So there is still that, like, if you don't tell a student how to use something, or, how not to use something, then they're using it and just feeling really uncertain and often shameful about, the usage, because they're like, I don't know. And they don't want to come and ask, because that's, like I mentioned, a really scary thing to discuss with an admission representative. And then there is this additional trickle down effect from, universities don't have these policies, and that makes college counselors fearful. College counselors are saying, well, how do you expect us to talk to students about this and engage in these important conversations with students about their usage, when we don't know how the university expects a student to use it? So, that we're really, one thing that AICA is really trying to do is encourage institutions to come out with clear policies specific to college admissions, in terms of how AI should be used. Most universities have a campus-wide policy. You find that, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer at this point. Like, universities have a campus-wide policy. Most of them are pretty good. A lot of schools, the Cal State system, really has integrated AI. You can use lots of different tools for free, and that's common at a lot of institutions right now. But college admissions, it's not catching up. It's not realizing, like, it's still a really new idea that, oh wait, we need a policy, specific to college admissions. And I think a student that's not able to approach a college admission representative at their table at a college fair, or like during a college high school, or a high school visit, when reps sit down with high school students, if they can't ask that question of, like, how is your university using AI? I mean, that is such an important question, not just in the admission process of, like, how I should be using it to apply to your university, but also, will your instructors be telling me, showing me how to use it? Will it be a part of my learning? And I don't think many admission representatives are equipped to answer those questions right now. And that's a problem because students should be asking that. If you want to be ready for the real world, you need to have these skills. So the question is like, how are you going to prepare me for the real world in terms of artificial intelligence? And I've heard so many college reps. I mean, the worst I've heard is when reps say, "Oh no, we don't use AI. That's not something that is, part of our institution. That's not something that our admission office is using." And that's just it's they just they didn't know how to talk about it, and that's a big problem.
Well, what I observe right now is like we're talking about AI in admissions. Like we're talking about AI as if it's like the internet, right? Like or like I don't know, heat to cook food. Like there are just so many different ways that we can talk about use of AI, whether it's on the high school counselor side, the student side in creating their materials, in the college side in reviewing students' materials. And interestingly, what you just said about that counselor who answered the question like, "Oh no, we don't use AI in the admissions process." What I suspect the question that I think they are answering is potentially not the question that the student asked. The question that I suspect they are answering, or like the underneath of that, is likely, will you view me as a number, crunch me through an AI program to determine if I'm admissible or not? But what the student is potentially asking, like, and again, this is just like this flattening of like AI as a monolith instead of like the counselor asking, like, oh, what's the reason that you're asking me? Like, are you asking me to understand if you come to our school, will you be well prepared for the real world because our professors teach with AI? Are you worried that we use AI detection in the application process? Are you worried that we reduce you to a set of numbers and don't read your whole file? Here's how we think about that. And the way I think about this like big lockup right now is that if we have these like misaligned signals to students as we meet them, from the time that they are prospective students, it creates a potential retention and mental well-being gap down the road because you will have a student who is like less solidly connected to the institution because they won't feel they can be their full authentic selves. They won't feel like they can sort of relax into this like secure relationship with the college because there is such like a disconnect and misalignment between like what we're showing and signaling and between what is like really happening. So I actually do worry about the retention impact. Just like all day long, I'll diagnose yield problems. I'll be like, well, you got to diagnose that upstream. I feel the same way about retention problems. Like if you're showing this really shaky signal to students or really like noisy signal to students, then you're not going to have secure attachment with your students like from the beginning, which I super worry about.
Definitely, and taking that even a step further, even if you did have that, let's say you were able to kind of keep that student because maybe it's an institution that's not embracing AI, and and the student and goes through all those 4 years, they're not prepared for that next step, and that's I've seen a lot of that where a student's very comfortable in the environment and they've been taught all of the writing process and its complexity and knows how to do it all without AI. And now they're being thrown into a world that's expecting them to use AI. So, yeah, I think there's both of those risks of the risk of, during those 4 years, there not being a connection because it's not, but there's also the connection of the risk of it being a connection, but not preparing them for the real world. And those are two things I think both of them are happening simultaneously right now.
Yeah, yeah, good point. I mean, I think about the ways that, like, in which I experienced, like, elementary school and learning math, which I really struggled with as a kid, and I remember a teacher saying to me, like, "Well, you're not gonna walk around with a calculator in your pocket in the real world, and, like, god damn it if I don't have the whole freaking internet of things in my hand at all times, including a calculator." So, like, there have been all these different shifts around, like, it's not as important to remember facts, but it's more important to know how to go get information. It's not as important to like write mechanically correctly, but it's really important to know how to get that out of AI to prompt that. And I don't think those skills should go away. It's just that shift. And I think those two things are happening. I think those two things are definitely happening simultaneously, as you say.
Yeah, no, those skills aren't going away, but they're definitely evolving, right? I mean, my fifth grader is starting at a level of math that's so, so, so much further than I was at in fifth grade. And that's because of the tools that he has at his disposal. I mean, he's constantly, playing around. I mean, he's even been playing around ChatGPT these days of like, create these complex math problems for me that are at a fifth grade level about this and that, including the characters that I like in the book that I'm reading. I mean, and he loves it. It's like I just remember math being horribly boring. That was my, it didn't click with me. And I think that this technology could have made it click with me. And that it makes me sad now because I'm like, an adult that never like fell in love with math, but I'm also see so much potential for our children. And, really the biggest concern I have right now with my fifth grader is like, why are they making him memorize facts still instead of working on those higher level like creativity and, I mean, all of the stuff you could be doing with this new technology, and they're just not doing it. They're still making him memorize like the dates of wars and names of people. And I just don't think that's a good use of his time. And it's very boring. He's very bored during that kind of learning.
Right, right. I know. I think about like how at one point in my head for my AP art history class, I had 500 images like that I could spit out the name of the artist, the year that it was done, the country and the medium that it was like, and that's like pieces of art. That is like literally things I don't need to know now. And I think I purged it mostly from my memory. Um
There's some of
yeah,
those
that
you'll never forget. Like, you have at
no,
least
true.
those that are definitely taking up space up there until you are 100 years old.
Probably. Well, I'll be really fun if anyone takes me on a European vacation. Like I'll spit them all out from I'll be like, "Oh, yes, what we're looking at." Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, Emily, and I'm curious if you'll tell us a little bit about like specific things that the AICA group is doing, the programming that we're running, the webinars, like what's available for people, what should people care about, why should people join that group?
Yeah, yeah. We are doing a lot of, kind of different areas of work in terms of trying to create resources, create value for our different members. So we have three different kinds of members. We have members that would be on the high school side, so high school college counselors, both private, public high school counselors, also the private sector, so private college counselors as well. On the universities side, we have enrollment directors that are part of our community. We have, people like myself, college counselors, directors of admissions, everybody in the admissions office, and also in the financial aid office, any of those other offices that touches college admissions as well. And then the third group that we have is the ed tech world, the world that's providing really awesome services. Some of these are startups, and others are really established organizations like College Vine. So some of these are creating new tools that can provide more college counseling to high school students, and all over the place there. But what we're doing is creating a lot of different opportunities for these three groups to interact with each other, but also, learn within their, useful things for their own group there. So, for example, we put out webinars that, we did one recently on letters of recommendation. And that was one that was just, I think we highlighted the College Vine letter of recommendation tool, which is really awesome and a free tool that counselors are using in that process. And, that was meant to, yes, provide them opportunities to see how you could do it, but also we brought on two people from the university side to talk about how they really encourage college counselors to use these tools in the letter of rec process, because there was definitely kind of a blockade there where a lot of counselors were like, well, I really think that human aspect of writing these letters is important. And the admission representatives, they don't feel that way in general. I mean, they want certain aspects of that letter, of course, to always be there. They want a quality letter of recommendation. But there are definitely ways that you can do that with AI, and admission representatives encourage, college counselors to do that. Another example more on the university side is back to kind of we talked a little bit about policies. So we're really doing a lot to try to, create tools so that when universities have that aha moment of, hey, we need a policy specific to our admissions process and AI, they have something to start with, that they're not just starting with a blank page, but we, are creating resources for them to help them in that process. So we have a committee together that's we're hoping for sure by NACAC in September to kind of launch a Google file that will be templates for universities to use in that process of creating a policy for their office. And then the goal there, as I mentioned, is that trickle down effect. Once more of those policies come out, that helps high school counselors, talk about it more. And that in the end benefits the students. And I'd say, that's the ultimate goal here. And, I'm amazed I've gotten, this far without talking about that. But of course, to me, that's just like the underlying of everything is that students are really struggling in this college admissions process. It's gotten more confusing year upon year. It's getting less transparent. It's just the whole thing is not getting better in any way year upon year. And I see this technology as something that could really help students in this process. It's great. There's a small percentage of students that have access to really quality college counseling, either a private college counselor or a college counselor in their public school, private school, but that's not the majority of students. The majority of students don't have that. They're struggling on their own, and the internet was an amazing resource, that came out that helped them. But this is just taking it to a whole other level that offers a bigger percentage of students quality college counseling. And so I'm just really hopeful that that it can kind of have that trickle down effect in that way. So right now it's mostly webinars. We also present at conferences. Our different members, we try to also create opportunities at different conferences for the members to meet up. We're going to have a pretty significant presence at WACAC in May in Las Vegas, and then also the larger NACAC conference in September. And so we're just trying to bring in more members that also want to contribute in various ways too of creating content. We're really active on LinkedIn, but we also have a website, edhub.ai, where we keep not just our upcoming, events, but we also keep all of our recordings there. So it's a great resource of like going back. You can find that letter of recommendation recording there, lots of different of our past events.
Yeah, we really care to be like a repo of that knowledge for sure. Emily, you and I are both like traveling a lot and speaking a lot. I'm curious if you can talk about like what is a question you hate getting from an audience about AI in college admissions? Like what is the thing that you like are on stage, someone asks you this question and you sort of inwardly either roll your eyes or inwardly chuckle to yourself like here we go again. I've got a favorite, but what's yours?
Yeah, that's I definitely have one that comes to mind. And I would say I'd say it definitely always like makes me laugh and but I wouldn't say I hate it because I do like that it opens an opportunity for a really great
Mm.
conversation.
Oh,
And
you're so generous of spirit.
I've learned how to pivot it into like, I've heard this so many times that now we can take this into a moment of opening up an opportunity for you to kind of understand
You're
this.
better than I am. Okay, yeah, what is it?
It's haven't I noticed so many college essays that are so obviously written with AI? Now that AI is out there, I must be kind of losing my head because, a big portion of my job for 3 to 4 months out of the year is reading
Reading.
essays.
Okay.
So I get this question a lot of, from parents, students, and also high school counselors love this question of just, man, you just must be reading a lot of essays written.
Oh, so it's like it's this assumption that you can like not only spot it, but you are bothered by it.
Yes, yes, both. I mean, it comes at different ways, but it's often just a fascination with it of like, wow, you must be like inundated with AI now, now that it's out there. And I tell you, the first few times I heard that, I thought it was such a funny question because I was like, what do you think we were reading before AI? We weren't reading essays that were written by 17-year-olds. Like, do you think it went from like reading essays that a 17-year-old wrote to reading essays from AI? No, we've been reading essays that have been written by college coaches. They've been written by parents. Some of them have been written in a good, in an ethical way. I'm not saying that, every student has been cheating using these resources. They're told to use those resources, but they are polished essays. These are not like a 17-year-old's go at writing a college essay. These are polished essays. These are essays that have been polished by really qualified humans, And so I wouldn't say there's all that much difference. Yes, there's small, sometimes I'm like, oh, I can this seems a little bit more like AI would have written it more than a qualified college counselor. But honestly, in my own perception of those, I'm like, wow, this student is being resourceful. And maybe they didn't have access to a human to help them and they're using technology to help them. I find that interesting. But this kind of just opens that conversation of like, we've been reading essays for a very long time, that really show a level of privilege, when an essay is super solid and refined, that's really showing a student's privilege. I mean, that,
Implicit privilege for sure. Yeah.
and I'm just like, is that what we're looking for? As an admission representative, am I trying to admit the most privileged students? No. So, when an essay has a lot of problems, like that's understandable. In the same way, like I'd say now, when they don't have guidance, when an essay is written with AI, like, isn't that kind of expected if we're not providing them any guidance? So that I'm just, I just hear a lot of conversations around that. I think it's the first thing that comes to people's mind when they hear about college admissions is often, oh, all the essays now are written by AI, and that must be, such a game changer. And it is in a lot of ways. But I would just say because more students can now create a polished essay, before it was just a smaller percentage of students that had the resources to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have a very generous you have like a very generous spirit on like your view of this question, which I'm sure pivot nicely into like the opportunity of talking about like how things really have been. And this is, there is greater opportunity for better college access. I honestly, Emily, I would have guessed, I would have put money on that, like you and I would have the same annoying or like, inward eye roll question. Mine is not that actually. Mine is about like the environmental impacts of AI. That's the one I get that I'm just like, okay, here we go. Like, do I need to mention China in this answer? Like, do I need to mention like nuclear waste and 3 Mile Island? Like, I have a hard time. I think my short answer now is something around like, yeah, actually the way we train models is much lighter to environmental impact than like the creation of AI in general. And honestly, like if we think we're going to limit human innovation by pushing this down, like no, that's not going to happen. Humans time and time again actually push outside of like they will continue to innovate using this. So that's mine is the environmental impact question.
Yeah, I would say there's a few things that fall under that category. It's almost like it's a shutdown category where they're like, I can't even listen to this because of this, because of, this thing that I've heard about how it's, has this big
Which is
problem.
like incomplete information for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like if you're really concerned about an aspect of something, you better learn more about that, So I'm always like, hey, join the conversation and figure out, what is actually happening there. And yeah, and you learn pretty quickly it's a very complex issue. It's not black and white. And yeah. And the other thing is, looking at our energy usage day to day, I'm just always amazed. I'm always like, do you use Amazon? Do you drive to work? I mean, I know it's all of these things that, that are so important to our day to day lives, but we do come from a country that is like the biggest energy consumer by far, and we don't consider that, we're not concerned about turning our appliances off when we go on vacation for some reason, like, in our culture, that's just normal to leave everything, plugged in and running. But, that's different. That's other cultures think that's insane.
Everyone right now is like real quick unplugging their microwave ahead of ahead of the weekend.
Yeah, but that's a hard one because people shut down the conversation, themselves. They close their ears after hearing some of those, those problems, that AI has. But yeah, I think it's more reason to stay in the conversation.
Agree. Well, Emily Pacheco, final question. Aside from what's happening sort of conference-wise for us with AICA, and yes, I can't wait to see you at WACAC and again at NACAC, I'm curious if you will tell me something that you're excited about the group doing over the next couple of months that everyone should be tuned into and aware of.
I would say the most exciting, I mean, I really like the variety of webinars that we've put together. And I do just have to give a quick shout out to Jasmine Solomon, who's just been
major snaps, Jasmine. Yes, agree. She crushes.
She really does. She's an incredible person to have just on your side. Yeah, and so she's been really a lot of that person power behind putting together some really incredible webinars, and we are have a number more in the works that we're going to be putting on our calendar soon. And I just I really am excited about doing more of that, and even the live recordings are great, but just having that resource when people finally come and say, "Oh, what is out there? What can I, what can I learn about this?" Just having this huge repertoire of stuff to go to. And so that's definitely our webinars, but it's also a lot of our other content that's out there. So encourage you, like, join the LinkedIn group. We're really active there, really putting out a lot of good stuff there. And yeah, we expect to just grow and do more within, in these next 6 months leading up to NACAC. But just moving forward, I'm looking for more people that want to contribute to this and want to just see it go further, see more resources out there, and more people join this conversation. So that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to be like by your side. I am such a person who has like such a big ego and my own like main character energy issues. And I am very rarely happy to be like somebody's sidekick. But like Emily, I am so thrilled to be your sidekick occasionally. It delights me to no end. So thank you for allowing me to stand next to you some of the time. I super appreciate it.
Aw, it's so great to have you. I'm so happy. I love our group of advisors. It's really, a diverse group. It covers all of our member buckets. And it's changing and evolving. So, that's what's exciting too, just having all these different perspectives in the room there, and all these different people that contribute all these great ideas. And you more than anyone have been like personal support, like, giving me a pep talk before I go on stage. Like I've really appreciated it. Just yesterday, I was telling somebody that I was like, it's, Emily's role isn't just college fund.
Like
She's actually
hype man.
yeah, she's personal support for AICA too. Somebody was like, "What is College Vine, doing with AICA?" I was like, "College Vine? No, oh, Emily, my personal
You're like, it's Emily.
support." So it's I love that.
Happy to be your like body man and psych up show anytime. Thank you for joining me, Emily Pacheco. Thank you so much for being on the show. Humans do well, drink water, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.